Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our guest that's going to be joining us today. But thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of Cherry Willow Apparel with Purpose. I'm really excited to be joining you all. We just came off the back of one of our most successful initiatives that we've ever launched, Pedal for Progress 2, Florida edition. So last week I was biking from Jacksonville down to Miami, and we partnered with a dozen nonprofits along the way to really tell their stories and just highlight the amazing work that each of those organizations and the people that support them are doing in their communities. And it was so much fun, aside from the ridiculous heat in Florida, to just be able to connect with some amazing folks and learn more about the work that they're doing. And I came away inspired and wanting to do more. There were a lot of really great ideas. We're going to continue to be able to collaborate and spotlight some of these organizations across Florida that we connected with. And there will be more states that I'll be riding across in the future. And again, hopefully we can avoid the long days in the heat. As I am a Midwesterner, so I am not built for that Florida heat, but I did my best. So please stay tuned to Cherry Willow Apparel's social pages. Our Director of Impact, Shauna, did an amazing job getting content from the ride out all last week. So we were putting up stories every day, highlighting each of the organizations, and we'll continue to put up videos on both LinkedIn, YouTube, but a lot of the content has been living on Facebook and Instagram, as well as TikTok. So any social platforms that you're on, following us gives us an opportunity to reach a wider audience, and sharing and engaging with our content helps us to help address more misconceptions around homelessness and the people it impacts. And that leads us into today's show really nicely. We are bringing on a guest who is coming in all the way from Australia. So I'm sure she is no stranger to extreme heat, and also probably some crazy animals from what I understand. Thankfully, I didn't have to deal with too much of that last week in Florida. But Helen, thank you so much for getting up early and joining us. And we were dealing with some tech issues, and I imagine that's not the most fun thing to deal with first thing in the morning. So please welcome, and would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. Yes, I'm coming to you from Adelaide, South Australia. If you've ever looked at the map of Australia, you would see that we're in the middle down the bottom. So, yes, we do have a few crazy animals. We also have a few crazy people, but that's okay. I think that's why we probably relate well. So I have about 40 years experience in the criminal justice system. And I'm extremely mindful. My husband and I work together with people who needed a second chance, and the second chance being re-entry into the community and needing those four things like on a chair. You need accommodation. It's just basic, right? You need education. You need a social network around you to give you support, to give you that second chance. So I don't know if that's an introduction there. Is that what you had in mind, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always really exciting to me to talk to people that are, in the nonprofit space and in the business of kind of giving people another opportunity to reinvent themselves. And that was actually one of the organizations that we met with last week on our Pedal for Progress ride was Angels Ministry of Mercy. And so they, very similar, work with women that have been in the prison system and help them to, have a safe space that they can come from and can build this new foundation and really be able to be, the best versions of themselves coming out of that experience. And so I'd love to give you an opportunity, Helen, to share a little bit about your experience and, how you first came about, focusing on the second chances space.
Well, that's a very interesting question because at the ripe old age of 20, I met a man who was an international criminal. He
Wow.
had taken a one-way ticket to Rio. He was headlines. He was out. and I wanted nothing to do with him. My father had a dream to give him a second chance. Um, he had lost everything. He'd lost his wealth, his station in life, his friends, his family. His wife divorced him while he was overseas. Um, and we met, and 3 weeks later, he asked if I would marry him, and I said yes. So he had nothing going for him, actually. He was penniless, had a criminal record, 20 years older, and a divorcee. So what more do parents want for their 20-year-old daughter? So that was the beginning of my exposure to the criminal justice system, because then he needed to go to court, face the music, do the crime, do the time. And then I was doing my nursing training, and then with my little Datsun 1600, it would find its way to the prisons he was in. So that was for a couple of years, but then we married. We married while he was still in prison. So
Wow.
yes, crazy. Yeah. I'm one of those crazy Aussies. And we did it in secret. We eloped. There was no way I could tell my sisters because they would have blabbed. We swore all our guests to secrecy. So I don't know how much detail you want about that, but that was my entree into the criminal justice system through him. When he finally finished his time, he then, rather than going back to making money and into the lifestyle that he was accustomed to, he decided to dedicate his life to service. And that service was giving compassion and empathy to people who really did need a second chance because they had no one else. He knew what rejection was like. He knew and had tasted what it was like to lose everything and everybody. And so through that, he gave people many second chances. But we didn't stop there. What we discovered over years was that the children of prisoners are the innocent victims of crime. It's not their crime, not their fault. And so he felt that pain because of what had happened to his own children and the pain of them feeling abandoned and losing their dad because, he took a one-way ticket to Rio. He was headlines. He was a very wealthy man and great status, but we're talking, you just look so young, Matt. You probably don't even know what I'm talking about. We're talking mid-70s, right?
Okay.
And so he was well known for his headlines. I did research in my book and found 62 headlines. And that's why I wanted nothing to do with this man. That's nothing to do with him. But we were together for 46 years, have two beautiful sons, and I now have a little granddaughter. But our work was around supporting the children of prisoners because it's not their crime, not their fault.
And what inspired him to make that change? Was it your love and influence? I'm sure that had a piece and kind of focusing on giving those people second chances, or what made you want to dedicate?
He'd been humbled. You can't go much lower than being in a Brazilian prison for 15 months. I mean, he was used as a political pawn. Australia wanted an extradition treaty with Brazil. Now, putting all that horrific, deplorable conditions aside, he just knew that children needed to be given hope and an extra support because they fall between the cracks. And many people just don't think about the impact that imprisonment has on children. And I think that was part of our education role. We started camps, mentoring camps for these children so they didn't feel they were alone, So there was birthday presents, Christmas presents, whatever it took so that they didn't feel forgotten. They didn't feel second-rate citizens, so to speak. They were already being teased at school. You know what I
Right.
mean? Your old man's in prison. There's a social isolation right there. And we just wrapped these programs and ourselves around them. And it was amazing. The encouragement they received, they had hope they could make better decisions for their own futures.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I know how important community is. I'm a single dad, and I have 3 kiddos. And actually, my older brother, he had spent some time in prison, and thankfully, my parents were able to raise his oldest daughter. But certainly without that community that you've built for those kids, it does have a real impact. And I've seen it firsthand with some of the things that my niece struggled with in her youth. Not having that community, and kind of, just to your point, like kids making fun of you if you don't have 2 parent households, or you're not coming from a traditional background. That can be really, really challenging. And so I'd love to expand a little bit on like how community partnerships have been integral in helping to break some of the cycles of disadvantage that you see, with kids whose parents have, had the misfortune of being in prison.
Yeah, so our relationship with the Department for Corrections was really pivotal, our access into the prisons. But we gave opportunity for the imprisoned parent to apply, to participate, so they could contribute. They felt they were giving their approval, if you like. And so we would then, of course, create a relationship with the single mum or the single dad who was in the community. That takes some trust, and once there was the trust, and we would wrap around the support especially for the children, then it flowed from there. It was all based on developing relationships of support, and especially we would raise money for school uniforms and shoes if they were struggling. I don't know if you guys have uniforms at school, but we do. And so we just educated the community through the process. That was important, and just come alongside them. I mean, even if it meant going, in fact, we would get invitations from the schools, because the problem with children of prisoners often is they're so vulnerable because of their parents' associations. They too can go down a pathway towards crime, and juvenile misbehavior, of course, starts with truancy. So we would get phone calls from the schools saying, "We've just discovered that Johnny's dad's in prison and he's playing up. Can you come alongside him? Can you come and meet him?" And that's what we would do. We had a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education, and they knew to call us. And so I think that's significant too. So it's a range of things to try and help the child, and I mean child all the way up to 18.
Sure.
So we did everything with permissions, relationship, and wraparound services, and we would link them. If mum was struggling with her accommodation or whatever else was needed, we would find other services to wrap them around and strengthen their position.
So would you credit those relationships with both the Department of Education and the prison system as being able to help create a community that creates real change versus one that maybe just offers more temporary support that doesn't actually affect recidivism or anything else?
Well, relationships is everything. Your services are not known, and you can't actually get cooperation unless you have those relationships with those departments. It's all about access as well. We have volunteers visiting prisoners, and so requests would come to us actually from so many other agencies. It wasn't funny because they would come across these families and didn't quite know what to do, and so then they'd call us in. Um, so it's very important also in your staff selection and volunteer recruitment that the children, the people are non-judgmental, of course, and that's what Second Chances is all about. You know, um, again, not their crime, not their fault. You didn't get to choose your parents, right? I didn't choose my
Yeah.
parents, and they didn't choose their parents. And you know, I don't know if I think it is in the matter of the states that 80% of all crime is drug and alcohol related,
Wow.
and that's huge. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that means sometimes under the roof of where the children have been raised, there isn't necessarily someone who gets up in the morning and goes to work. So who teaches them work ethic? There
Sure.
isn't necessarily someone who actually encourages them to complete their homework. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who's going to do that? So we take so much for granted. Well, when I say we, those of us who actually come from a regular family or a supporting family, um, sometimes it's the language. The language isn't always that of encouragement towards a pathway of success for them to make good decisions for their own lives, you know? So that's why the mentoring camps are so important. They had trust issues, they had abandonment issues, um, and we did whatever we can, particularly one-on-one mentoring and also with our caseworkers, um, to let them know that um, they can have a future. Um, we did have some funding from the federal government at one point to help youth find employment. Um, and part of that was to help them do whatever it takes to get employment. And if that meant you needed your driver's license, the funding would pay for them to have driver's licenses. Because who wants people behind the wheel who don't have a license? You know,
Right.
and so all those little things we take for granted. I mean, I don't know about you, but my parents taught me how to drive, and so you know what I'm saying? Sometimes these kids are so brazen, they just get behind the wheel and do whatever. And that's not good for anybody, for them to be loose on the road. So we would do that, and we would encourage them to complete their education. And that's probably the main driving factor, because if they pulled out, if they dropped out, if they got on with the wrong crowd, that was the beginning of the downhill slide for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually reminding me about a few of the different organizations we've connected with. I shared a little bit, about the Pedal for Progress rides that I do. So last year we had our very first ride where I biked from Sacramento down to San Diego. And one of the organizations we connected with in San Diego was called Youth Empowerment. And the founder, Arthur, he had been in prison for a number of years. And then when he came out, he wanted to create a mentor program to be the mentor that he didn't have, so that, to your point, they don't go in these environments where crime is possible, right? 'Cause most crimes are of opportunity or based on the environment that you're in. And if you think that this is my best opportunity to get X, Y, or Z, and this is what I see the people around me doing, then how are you going to know any different? And another reason why we do the bike rides is because of transportation. Like you mentioned, transportation can be a really big barrier towards employment. If you don't have a consistent form of transportation, how can you get to an employer on time? And then how can you go on and continue to build, yourself into a person that's reliable and that's being able to exit some of those different environments. So when you've been working with the kids and like all through these different referral partners, if they haven't come from a background of having a really strong mentor or, family that's a good influence, how do you go about building that trust with them, in a way that allows you to have a positive impact on their lives?
It's not easy, but again, it's access and it's trust. So many times they don't even have self-belief.
Mm,
They don't, their image and their perception of who they are can be many times quite negative. And that's also been spoken into their lives often. The language of the home, or where they live, and the language to a child is really, really important. And you would know as a dad, um, if you put the child down, if you talk to them in a derogative way, that eventually has an impact. And I
absolutely.
know from my own childhood, my father continually put me down, and I think that is so, so important. So we would use language of encouragement, and um, that they could do whatever they wanted to do, whatever they really aspired to do, they could do it. And that hope and that encouragement is powerful, absolutely, powerful. And um, if you've been, and I call it cursing, you'll end up in prison like your old man. I mean, why would a mother say that? But
Right.
they don't realize that what they're saying has repercussions, because those words seep down into a child's heart. It's one thing to hear words in the head, it's another thing to actually start believing the rubbish, the lies. And I again come from my own personal experience. My father would say to me, "You'll be unsuccessful, you won't make it, you'll be a failure." Now, why would he say that to me and my siblings? Because he was transferring his own feelings, his own
Yeah.
failures, you know?
He was
And
projecting. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So um, that's why we would seek to take these children away for 48 hours, not much, but it was something, because it gave us an opportunity to speak into their lives. But the workers would follow them up, at least fortnightly, to meet them at a coffee shop, um, meet them at a park. Again, all with the permission of the caregiver. Now, sometimes the caregiver would be the single mum, or maybe she'd broken up with the father of the children that's in prison, or it could be the grandparent. And so we had many people. The caregiver is the part one who's caring for the children who are, abandoned, if you like. They feel abandonment by their parent. And it's critical in their development that they know they can have a good future and that they complete their education. We never want them to feel they're going to be a failure, because if they start to believe that, they will become that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We are what we think of ourselves, and we are what we repeatedly do. And I think, from a personal example, my mother's father, he told her when she was really young, he would always call her "Daddy's little dummy," and so like I don't think that she ever was that absorbed in her subconscious. And my mother is like one of the kindest women, super smart, intelligent, and like just but she had always heard like that she's daddy's little dummy. And that has a tremendous negative impact on a kid. And so like
Wow.
some people do it knowingly. I'm maybe he was joking, maybe not. But like I love that you're able to kind of help recondition these kids to think positively and to look for the opportunities, and help to find themselves. And I one of the second topics that we had for today was like why every person deserves the opportunity to rebuild. And it's like, especially if the kid, they grow up in an environment with someone that's not trying to build them, right? It's almost like they're more assassinating their character, if you will. So I love maybe if you could share a success story of, of someone, or it doesn't have to be personalized, but that you were really excited, like this person came in a really negative situation, and through the work of with you and your organization, you were able to help them get a really positive outcome?
Sure. Well, there were these two sisters that went on a camp, and they were quite young. I think it was something like 12 and 14. And one of those two sisters, their mum was in prison. They'd had it rough. They often went without food. They struggled in so many areas, but one of them realized that she wanted to finish her education. Nobody in their family had moved on to ever finish their secondary education. And she made that commitment to herself. And her sister actually didn't.
Mm.
And so they went on two different pathways. One of them, her name was Melanie, she actually became an assistant leader on the camps.
Oh, wow.
As an example to the young, we trained them up to become people who could move into leadership roles, because many of them had leadership qualities. So
Yeah.
we encouraged that on the mentoring camps, and the younger kids would look up to them. Anyhow, Melanie became the first person in her whole family to actually go to university. No
Wow.
one had ever gone to university. It was a major breakthrough. Now, she didn't finish the university, but just the other week she was married, and she is a managing she's a, what do you call it, a practice manager of a dentistry.
Wow.
Whereas, unfortunately, her sister went down a different pathway, and it included drugs and having more children and really making a bit of a mess of her life. But they both had the same opportunity. And so sometimes it's a choice of the child.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If you don't mind, just getting back to your mother-in-law.
My mother, just my mother. Yeah.
Your mother,
Mhm.
she was his little puppy. Well, I think about it. My father called me his baby elephant. So,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, I don't know where all this rubbish comes from. And maybe
Well,
that's
just
why I've always been a big woman all my life, because I've been his baby elephant.
well, I mean, as a single dad of three kids, my kids are 11, 10, and 8. It's like how I learned from that. That story always stuck with me because she didn't, she broke that cycle, right? Where like she showed us what was possible and always showed up for others, but I think almost to a negative way for herself. Where that's something I've worked with her on is that self love, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't go on and take care of others. But I don't understand parents that don't understand the impact that they have. And so that's actually, Cherry Willow, that comes from the names of the streets that I grew up on. And that's where I learned about unconditional love from my mother. And she had that from my brother, who really struggled. He had drugs and alcohol problems. He was in and out of jail. He has 5 kids with 4 different women. And she raised his oldest. As soon as I went to college, a 6-year-old girl moved in, and so she had kids under the age of 18 in her care from the time that she was 22 until she was 60. And like I couldn't imagine that. Like, I love my kids, wholeheartedly, but as when they're 18, I'm hoping that they're not bringing any grandbabies right on my doorstep, because I guess things that I would like to do out in the world. But
Of
my
course.
dad, I learned a lot about self-discipline, and like that's you learn from the people that you're around. I think there's that quote where you are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so I was very grateful to grow up in a loving household. But not every child gets that opportunity, and to your point, a lot of them take it for granted.
Look, Matt, I just love your mother. I
Yeah, I love
mean,
it too.
she's obviously full of unconditional love, and that really is what motherhood is supposed to be. You raise your children with love and discipline and encouragement, and you then trust that they will, in a way, follow your style. Fortunately, we had two beautiful sons, and they're doing extremely well. So we spoke love and encouragement into them all the time. It was our love language. Um, so I think we reap what we sow, yeah?
Yeah.
And what comes out of our mouth is powerful. And I think some parents fully do not appreciate the power of the tongue in the family home. How we speak to our children is so really important. I wish I had more encouragement from my own parents. But when my husband came into my life, my future husband, he actually said, "Are they really your parents?" But he was the one who said, "You can be whatever you want to be." But I was already speaking negatively to him about myself. I was putting
Wow.
myself, where did that come from? You know,
Yeah.
nobody, and it was a wake up call. He woke me up, and he played a pivotal role in my life to help me achieve what I went on in my career, which was wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's one of the third topics that we had for the show today was the connection between dignity and hope and that lasting change. And so it seems like your husband believed in you when maybe you weren't fully believing in yourself, and that's one of the really cool things that we did on the ride was we partnered with this organization called I Believe in You, and they have these bracelets. I gave them all away, so I don't have any more. But where you can actually, they have an app that you tag them on your phone, and then you document a moment that you had with someone that you believed in. And so one of the people we connected with in Florida that actually donated the bike for us was a bike shop called the Honey Pot Bicycle Collective. And that bike got me all the way down, all the way from Jacksonville down to Miami, and there was a young woman that works there. They call her the Doodler, and she decorated the bike. And I had the honor of being, the first bike that she decorated to be ridden. And so we did a really cool story about, with these bracelets, and I'm really excited to see, what she goes on to do. And she, her dad worked there, and he was really fun to talk to and put me through a really good workout before the ride to make sure I was all stretched out and loose. But for those kids that don't have that supportive parent, to be able to create a safe space for them to, explore and learn about themselves and also believe that things are possible. Another really cool moment from the trip was we were on the beach, and one of our partners, he played in the NBA, and Shauna, our director of impact, has foster youth that were able to come and meet him. And it was so cool to see how the boys lit up when they're meeting somebody that was in the NBA, and for them to believe in themselves to be professional soccer players or professional tricker or whatever it is that they want to do. It was a really cool moment, and so that's one of the reasons why I love Shauna. Absolutely, shout out Shauna. It's just has such a big heart and creates a space for kids that maybe don't have a role model in their lives from a familial standpoint to show them like what is possible if they believe in themselves.
Just a little question here. What's a tricker?
So a tricker, I learned about it last week. It's very similar to like floor and gymnastics, where like tumbling routines and you're doing all different sorts of flips and things like that. But it's just not on the floor in gymnastics. So it's kind of like a free form type of thing. But one of the boys, he's going to be the number one tricker in the world. That was his goal. And I just thought it was so cool that, I believe him. He's going to do that, It's like, it starts with that self-belief first, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, helping a child find their giftings. There's in each one of us, there's a deposit of something that we're good at, and finding that and discovering that, wow, that skill or that gift, whether it be singing or whether it be sport, is theirs for them, and they just need the encouragement to believe that they can continue that and develop it. And so, as you know, there are some families that the parents make sure that the child can learn a musical instrument. But that's not the case necessarily in these families, you
Yeah.
know. They don't go there because they never had that. Um, and I think that the significance of giving people a second chance is all around the fact that we want people to become law-abiding, contributing citizens. You know, the tax system, we don't want people to just simply exist. They need to be contributors. They need to um, learn how to work. And that's really what some people who put these families down, put down prisoners, they don't care. But really, it's important for the whole community that people are given a second chance. So well, I don't know how old you are, Matt, but my theory is that guys don't grow up till they're 40. So, you know, who's going to teach them how to work, how to manage their money, how to be a positive contributor to society and not just bludge. So if we can give them a second chance and believe in them, some people, oh, why should we give a job to an ex-prisoner? Why should we help them? Well, of all the people, they need it the most.
Yeah.
Provided they want to change. You know, like there's some requirements here. We're not just giving out jobs and helpfulness to anybody. They have to show that they seriously want to change. You know, they just need that help. They just need that opportunity, especially when they're first out into the community. And it's the children who benefit. And even though perhaps the love in that family is toxic, right? Unfortunately for the child, that's the only love the child knows, because that's
Right.
still my dad or that's still my mummy, you know. So if they have a supporting community around them and they know that through friends at school or they develop friendships at school and we come along and tell them they can choose and become whatever they want to become, that is a benefit to the community at large, because potentially they could end up becoming delinquents and end up in the prison system.
Yeah. And I think that ties really well into our last topic of the day, which was how purpose-driven work, creates ripple effects across communities. And that's actually how I came up with Cherry Willow. I've shared, I like tattoos to tell stories. And this one here is a Japanese philosophy called Ikigai. And so it's the intersection of what you're good at, what you love to do, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And so it's a way to find synergy in a capitalistic society, and be able to take your skills and apply them in a way that not only helps yourself but helps others. And that's a lot of the work that we do at Cherry Willow, is helping nonprofits communicate their value to the communities at large. And we use Apparel to help do that, and then we also use storytelling to help do that. Because to your point, with people that have been imprisoned, there is a large connection with homelessness. At least, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the States, once you have a record, now there's more barriers to employment. There's more barriers to housing. And then the more likely someone is to not see any other opportunities to provide for themselves or their families than to, go down the criminal path. And here in the States, they've also recently, with the Grants Pass ruling, allowed for the criminalization of homelessness. So just by existing, if you're not able to create enough profit to provide for yourself, now that can be an offense that gets you thrown in jail. And It's not like these jails don't cost money. These jails, the people that own them make money. And then the people that are homeless, it's not they're just sitting there all day. They're forced to work. So, it's a modern form of, indentured servitude. And it's really scary what's happening in some of the different municipalities. Thankfully, the federal level just allowed for it to be possible to be illegal, and individual municipalities can make that decision. But, there are municipalities that they want to build a 1,200 person prison. And so what I see there is so you're telling me you have money and you could build housing, but instead you're choosing to build a prison to put people into rather than empower people through housing to create a positive impact on the community.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Being put in prison for being homeless.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Where-
That's
Where's the mercy? Where's the compassion? Where's the kindness? Where's the humanity? I don't get it. But as you say, prison's a big money making industry.
it sure
It's
is.
wow. If we had a goal to actually empty our prisons, that would be good. But clearly, there maybe are people who just don't want them to be empty.
Yeah, I think it's, it shows that it's more about control, at least again here in the States, where, like you do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, where, it's not about the money because they have the money to fund programs that they support. Where when you look at the data, the most prudent economic decision is to house people, and then once they're housed, then you can help them with the surrounding support services, like you're saying, to build a community around these people and empower them to to be positive impact for the community at large. But that's not the goal, here in the States. The goal is to capitalize, just like it is on some of the natural resources, where everything it's an extractive model rather than an empowering model.
Wow. Wow. I know we struggle in Australia with homelessness too. But there's a big drive to help young people find accommodation, and that's home ownership is a big issue right now.
Sure.
In Australia, it has been almost so that generations can't afford to get into the ownership market, but that's why they're bound to pay rent for the rest of their lives, and that in itself can be a struggle. If you lose your job and you can't pay your rent, then you become homeless.
Yep.
It's a domino effect. It's like, so homelessness is a horrific state to be in because it impacts who you are, and as you know, I've never been there, thankfully, but to have compassion and understanding for people, sure, some people bring this stuff in on themselves, right? They've been drinking their money away, or they're on drugs, or whatever they've done. But if they want to turn around and break the cycle and get out of it, you see, that determination, they will get there because there are people that are willing to help them. It's just a question of meeting the right people, and finding that their own purpose. So that little tattoo on your arm, as you were speaking, I was thinking about everyone finding their purpose, in life, and believing that they have a purpose, believing in their humanity is of value, and they're not just a number. They are created with a purpose, and I think that is the goal of everyone, to find within ourselves what it is that we have as gifts and talents that we can hone and then contribute and give back. And it's just a very saddening thing. I'm still processing this imprisonment thing you've got going. That's harsh. But at least they get 3 meals. At least they get a roof over their head. They're not cold, probably. I mean, when you think about it, there are some people that think prison's great because outside in the community, they don't know how to survive. They get 3 meals a day. They have to pay electricity bills. They don't have to pay any bills, in fact. They just have to. The only problem about prison are the other people who you meet. And some of them are bad people. And they often have called prison the university of crime. It's where you go learn how to do more crime. But in terms of homelessness, well, you get 3 meals a day and you get a roof.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not a rehabilitated model, our prison system. And just punitive-based models just don't work. I mean, you look at with kids, right? What we were talking about earlier. If you're trying to punish those kids and enforce negative things on them, then what are they going to see? They're gonna be in an environment with negativity, and data has shown and research has shown that the positive reward of the affected behavior that you're trying to get them to operate in, like that is a way to recondition them to actually look for the good, and to find that good within themselves. And I talk a lot about light. I believe that each of us were born with light to shine on the world. But that light can often be stomped out by even well-meaning family members and friends who are just saying, oh, that won't work, or oh, you can never be a pilot, Matt, or whatever that they're saying to you. And then people start to believe that, and then they
put down.
Yeah, and then they have this deflection from self, where like, well, if myself this is what's calling to me, but my friends and family are telling me it's not possible, now I'm forced to either abandon this feeling and this intuition so I can stay with these same people, and that's where people, they get in that comfort zone, and it becomes really uncomfortable to grow. But comfort and growth, they're not synonymous. Growing is an uncomfortable process.
That's for sure. Yeah, being surrounded by the right people, choosing your friends. We all know that it's the peer power, right? Often gets people into trouble. Peer power, and many times crime is committed because they're impetuous. It's in the moment. They don't think.
Yep.
Let's just go quick and rob that bank. I mean, not that you can rob a bank much these days, but let's go and and some people think it's fun, but that's lawlessness, isn't it? There were no guidelines firstly laid down by their family or parents or the people that supposedly loved them.
Sure.
Actually, discipline, as you would know as a dad, discipline is a form of love.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting down boundaries because you love them. You're putting down guidance because you love them, because you want the best for them, and you instill in them a semblance of direction, which is good for them.
Yeah.
And you're doing it out of love. And you've received that from your mum. So you're transferring that around, you're wrapping them around with boundaries and discipline. I was pretty strong on discipline with my boys. In fact, my eldest says I was brutal. I was, actually. People would say to me, how come your boys are so well behaved? Oh, that was easy. I just beat the hell out of them and loved them to death.
Well, I can certainly remember getting a paddle a time or two, across the bum when I was a kiddo. But my dad swears it was only one time ever, when I ran out into the street, and almost got hit by a car. And he's like, well, don't do that again. You might die. And I was like, that's maybe fair.
He saved your life, mate. He saved your life.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that's discipline is certainly an area where I strive to improve with my kiddos and providing those boundaries. Because I'm a very free form, improvisational background, and like to just kind of be in the moment. And I operate really well in unstructured environments. I don't want to say I thrive in chaos, but I am very comfortable in chaos because I can be calm and kind of navigate. Which, having 3 kids, there's constant chaos, so that's no problem there. But being able to provide them the structure of bedtime is 9 o'clock, not 9:15, not 9:02. That's something that I'm working to continue to improve on as a dad, for sure.
You sound like you're a great dad. We raised our kids in under the principle of slow obedience was disobedience.
Yeah. It's disrespect. That's where's the I want to encourage them to be freedom, independent, self-sufficient, but also there's a line where your non-responsiveness does become disrespectful, and that's something that I think is important for the kids to learn.
Well, in fact, you're talking to a baby boomer, right? So I've gone decades ahead of you, but one of the things that I've observed, I think respect is one of those things that goes out the window when chaos emerges, because in the families we deal with, they do not respect anyone in authority. They do not respect the police. They do not respect the pastor or priest. They do not respect teachers. So respecting others is really critical for us as a community. So if a parent is saying negative put downs about the police, and okay, we're not saying the police are perfect, but anyone in authority, and so that it goes right across the board. And so children are basically taught to disrespect. We have trouble. Our community, our society has trouble right from the get-go. The moment you're by default teaching a child to disrespect, and respect breeds respect. What am I doing? What am I doing preaching to the converted? So there you go.
Well, I loved getting to really meet you, Helen, and chat with you, and I appreciate you getting up, fairly early on Australia time. For anyone that's following and would like to learn more about you and your work, there it is. How could they support you?
Well, this is the man on the front cover of the book. My husband, he passed 4 years ago. The book is called A Second Chance, and it's the story of him going to rock bottom and then pivoting his life in service for others and impacting hundreds and hundreds of lives because we believed in giving people a second chance. So this book is available on my website, HelenGlanville.com. So it's called A Second Chance, A Disgraced Lawyer's Journey to Redemption.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And then you also do speaking and coaching, is that correct?
Yeah, I do speaking appointments. And each chapter, there's 24 chapters in this book, and each chapter starts with a quote about the power of forgiveness.
Wow.
It's something we're not taught. So Mahatma Gandhi had a quote, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, even Kevin Costner. So, they have quotes about the power of forgiveness, the significance of forgiveness, and it's essential in a relationship. If you go to bed at night and you have anger towards your partner, it's not healthy. So the person that needs forgiveness the most is us to forgive, because we're set free from grudges and even though the person, we may not trust that person again, but it's really important to let them go and to forgive them.
Yeah, and I think also becoming grateful for difficult things that you've endured. That forgiveness is really crucial, to your point. And I think if you can take accountability for the different situations that you're in, and become grateful that you endured them and learn from them and are not going to put yourself back in that same environment, that can be a really healthy way to move forward too, and acknowledge how much you've grown as an individual, even if it means shedding some of these relationships with folks that you may not be aligned with anymore.
Well, my philosophy is that life is one big character development program. And at each point, we have decisions to make, and we have attitudes to show. And it's really important to make the best choices to serve others. And, as there's so much selfishness in this world.
Yeah.
So much. It's getting to a point where hatred is common, and it's a shame because they're the ones missing out. But you mentioned light, I've mentioned love. Hey, I just am really glad you explained Cherry Willow, because I thought you were going to be Cherry.
No. Yeah, the streets I grew up on, and I'd love to visit Australia someday. That's some really, I don't know, great culture. I feel like Australians have one of the better reputations of people internationally of just being like fun and adventurous folk. So like anytime I meet someone from Australia, they want to have a good time.
Yeah. Well, obviously we are all individuals, but I have never been to the United States. And the reason I have never been to the United States is my husband had a criminal record.
Oh,
So he died 4 years ago. So now I can go to the States.
there
I'm
you
not sure
go.
where I'm going to go or when I'm going to go. I have been to Canada. We went to Canada for some conferences, and he was sponsored in by the conference, even though he had a criminal record. But you know, I think it goes a little bit too far sometimes. If someone's a white collar criminal, they don't really know how to make a bomb. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, they're not violent and they've never harmed anyone. Yes, they have by doing the things they did
Financial.
with
Right.
finance, but they're not going to hurt anyone physically. Anyhow, that's another
Yeah.
story.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Chicago, I know some really great spots. We'll have to grab dinner or something. And I would love to, show you around the town.
Sounds like a date.
There you go.
I'm no spring chicken, honey.
Oh my goodness.
Good on you. I'm really respectful of your being a single dad. I recognize it's not easy, and I'm glad you've got support at least from your parents. And I hope that you stay strong, because kids can be a handful, especially on your own. I don't know how I would have been a single mom. There's no way. My husband was a fantastic dad, and I'm just very grateful, very grateful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And they certainly keep my hands full. But yeah, very, very grateful, and I've learned a lot from them. And that's something, like kids, they know how to live life. They go have fun. They meet new people all the time. They're very open, and like that's the way that I strive to be. I mean, I don't think I'm quite grown up yet, so I'm not 40. So maybe I got some some stuff that yet to learn.
Okay, good. It's just an observation, When I say that, when I go out speaking, say, "Oh, men don't grow up till they're 40," it can be women in the audience that say, "Well, mine hasn't grown up and he's 60," So.
Yeah, well, it's like the inner child is always there, and just how much of that do you want to showcase?
Good
um,
thinking.
well,
Great.
yeah, really appreciate the conversation, and if for anyone watching, please go to HelenGlanville.com to support her, to get the Second Chances book, and then if you're in Australia, book a speaking engagement or coaching opportunity. But it was really wonderful having you on, Helen. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning into the show. We're going to continue to be able to put out really great content that we captured last week on the Pedal for Progress ride. And if you know of a nonprofit that would like to be featured in rides in the future, please encourage them to reach out to us. We'd love to continue to get more of these rides on the calendar, to be able to tell more stories of the wonderful organizations working across our country, and perhaps even down the line worldwide. But for right now, focused on in the States. So please share our information. Myself, Matt at TreyWillowApparel.com, or Shauna, our Director of Impact, Shauna at TreyWillowApparel.com, to learn more about how we support nonprofits, how we help address misconceptions and raise awareness and increase visibility in the community. So thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.